Hello everyone, it is Joe here from OmniPoke, the channel that brings you guys everything Pokemon, and today we're going to be re-reviewing the Unbroken Bond set review that I did. We've now had the NEIC and the handful of regionals and special events that have accumulated to pretty much form our Unbroken Bonds meta. There's still, a few League Cups and smaller events, but basically it's just Worlds on its way for the rest of the season. So we've sort of had the little Unbroken Bonds block, and we can look back at these cards and see where I was right or wrong on reviewing these. I think it's always good just before I start my next set review, which is Unified Minds, which is going to be coming out, I'm hoping, Monday. I'm going to be looking over where I sort of overlooked things in sorts of reviewing cards, and where I maybe took cards for granted, where I was wrong, and where I can learn to improve my rating system throughout. Also, we can have a look at how the community rated these cards and how close they were to the mark as well. There is currently a community set review going on for Unified Minds. I'll put the link down in the description below, so please do partake in that. I think there's already been over 200 people replying on that just via the Facebook group, so that's amazing support, and it really, really does help the content, because getting more opinions on these cards as they come out is very, very helpful indications for, the people watching. It'll then give them an indication, not just my opinion, the opinions of the general public will be much more helpful a lot of the time, just to see where people believe cards are going to be. So, quick rundown of the ratings. I mean, we all know at this point I've kept the same rating system for a long time, but if you want to pause and take a look at the ratings, you can go for right there. But I can... my camera's in a terrible place. Let me see if I can move this real quick. I'll move myself down into the bottom corner instead, because my rating goes up in the top right over here. So the community majority rating is the one, that's currently going on right now. So there's one of these going on for Unified Minds. I've already translated all the cards for you. It looks a little bit crummy, but it's English and you can all read it pretty easily. So if you want to get involved in the current set review, please do so. And whoops, I've got to go back onto this because I've been playing around with OBS. But yeah, we start off with the supporters, and Giovanni's Exile, both the community and I rated it a 2-star. You can see here that it was kind of a card that's been really only used for like the Diglett style combo. Obviously the Rhydon, Rhyperior style deck never did anything. That was a huge flop, like a meme tier archetype. The Diglett Giovanni's combo did actually work in some variants of Shedinja control. Diglett being like additional pressure that you can use. You could Lieutenant Surge, then like Brock and Giovanni's in the same turn because you're sprinting your hand down so low. So the Diglett provides additional pressure the entire time, which was pretty interesting. It wasn't used in every Shedinja control list though, so still pretty weak overall. Notably as well, the sort of Tord engine of Zoroark, as we saw towards the Sweden event, as well as the Sweden regionals and the NEIC. He played like a thick Lele, thick Dedenne line and incorporated one Giovanni's Exile. So there's been a couple of little highlight reel moments for Giovanni's Exile, but nothing too incredible. I think the 2-star place is still the perfect place for him. Going forward as well, I'm going to try and look at these cards with a sort of light towards post-rotation. Giovanni's doesn't seem that great, to be honest. There's less gusting effects, so there's like less reason to clear your bench a lot of times. But if you want to like spam some abilities, the Dedenne still around, Mewtwo's still around, those are options that you can go for. Technically, there's going to be less spreading. Most likely, Tapu Koko's going, and it's harder to play Weezing very easily. So there's more sort of time to give Giovanni's Exile. There'll be a point in the game where you can get use out of him. But overall, I still think he'll be one of these cards that you see probably less, I would say, now. There's still the Shedinja deck potentially in post-rotation, so there's maybe still that small Diglett combo there, but that's really about it. Green Search, easy 5-star card. We've seen it has ended up working very nicely with Baby Blacephalon. It worked very nicely with Reshizard as well. There was a Greens build of Reshizard that just played 4 Volks, and that seemed to do very well. Green was still incorporated with Gardevoir, as you can see here, and it was in a lot of the stalling decks that played Lucario, Malmetal, and stuff like that. But there's also the Hooper-based builds of Stall, which then played, just Pokegears, Stevens, and Bill's analysis. So, yeah, Greens has lived up to the hype. It is that double scatter effect that is still so strong. And post-rotation, I think it is still continuing to be very good. Picking out custom catchers to give yourself gusting opportunities is obviously very powerful. We no longer have Let Loose, so you're a lot less worried about those opening hands just getting thrown away, and then you have very low odds of getting into your greens to get yourself going in the first place. So I think Green's engines will still be very powerful post-rotation, so still going to be a really, really strong card. Janine, easy 1-star, very poor supporter card, still very, very weak. Koga's Trap, in theory, gets a little bit stronger. We lose Kukui now, so it's not competing anymore for being a damage modifier that we have in formats. And static conditions are actually way more frustrating for the opponent, especially Confusion and like Paralysis and all that sort of stuff. And Sleep. These are all like way, way stronger post-rotation because Guzma and Acerola both go. So these lingering effects might be really, really annoying for the opponent a lot of the time. So Koga's Trap is not a supporter that you should sleep on anymore, I don't think. It's getting better. Currently still a 1-star. Like, it didn't see any play currently. Again, this was a card that was sometimes a one-off in the Shedinja control deck just to confuse things, to slow people down from attacking into your Oranguru every turn. So that's its real only like noteworthy include right now. But Confusion gets way stronger. There are decks that will be having Tantalizers and Switches in their deck as their only outs around Confusion. And Koga can buy yourself a turn if you're a 2-hit KO deck. Poison and Confusion can be really annoying for them to retreat out of stuff. And if you just need 1 damage to push yourself over the edge, Koga's Trap could still work. So that's definitely something to bear in mind as my desktop tells me that my computer's dying. Lieutenant Surge's Battle, or Strategy as we now know it, I rated 4 stars. I think it's fair putting it in the 4-star category. The community rated it a huge 5-star card. It's seen some play in Green's Reshizard. Kiana Meany's regional winning list did incorporate 1 copy of this so that you could go for like a Surge into Greens plus Welder, or like a Welder plus Judge. Some cool combos he had available, but it wasn't necessarily like a staple in the Green's Reshizard as the format developed. We didn't see much Zoro control. That was, from the starting point, a lot of people were worried at how powerful controlling Zoroark-based builds would get if they had Lieutenant Surge. It turned out that the Zeb Striker sprinting lock deck was the better place for it. The Lieutenant Surge opened up these things that I've already mentioned in here. The Koga's Trap and the Giovanni's Exile. They were includes into the Shedinja deck just because you had Surge that you could use, whilst also going for Brock and whatever else you wanted to do on that turn. So that was very, very powerful. It has found its way into a lot of these stalling archetypes as well. Stall did pretty good overall in the Sun and Moon to Unbroken Bonds metagame. It was sort of dinking and dodging different matchups and had to change up its tech Pokemon, be it Vileplume, be it Bronzong, be it a few other things in there as well. But Lieutenant Surge was sometimes a presence in those stalling decks, so definitely a powerful card. Going forward, I think the straight-up stalling archetypes are less likely to be successful. I think losing Max Potion and Acerola are 2 very bad sort of things for you to lose. And those are things that you would spam to buy yourself time, but that's not to say that Lieutenant Surge's Battle won't be an effective card still. There's now the sort of Miss Magius reset stamp combos that some people will be trying for Worlds, I imagine, and Lieutenant Surge might also be sort of part of that package to really try and slow people down from those early game situations. And just in general, this still is a lingering powerful effect, and being able to catch up with some key supporters on turns is still nice. So although the supporter pool does decrease greatly, there are still a handful of ones that you'd like to use on combination turns, and I think Lieutenant Surge will still end up being in a handful of decks, maybe as a small count, but still definitely a card worth noting. Mullane, easy 1-star, very, very poor card. Red's Challenge was rated 3 stars by the community. Really hasn't seen a huge amount of play. I remember reading Alex Shemansky's article, I believe it was on Pika-Rom, that played 1 or 2 copies of Red's Challenge very recently. That's not really been all that relevant. I think the biggest thing to note is the sort of birth of the Red Bull build of Gramble. The build initially was cutting Magcargo and then just playing Red's Challenge instead. I never really liked that at all. I still think having a 2-2 Magcargo line plus 2 Red's Challenge just to give yourself effectively additional Ultra Balls was much stronger. So I think for that reason we'll bump it up to 2 stars. I think it's relevant in Gramble based builds, which is probably a tier 2 to 3 type archetype in this format. And the Reds is not really like a defining card in the list, but it's a card that you'd expect to see in every Granbull these days. So I think going forward, Granbull is no longer a thing, so it doesn't really have like a home anymore, so to speak. But with the lack of search options, Red's Challenge may be a lot better now, because it can guarantee some key pieces, it can get important Prism Star cards, as well as having some discard synergy, which we do like miss out on a lot now that we don't have 4 Ultra Balls in every deck, pretty much. So having some discard synergy via Reds could actually be quite good. So I think Red's Challenge is going to be a card that sees more play post-rotation than we've seen it so far, despite it no longer having like that guaranteed home that it just like goes into. I think there'll be times when Red's Challenge is like a reasonable supporter in decks as like a 2 of, never really a 4 of, I don't think. If you want to have a discard synergy supporter, I think Hapu will still be the stronger choice over Reds, but possibly a couple of Reds could sneak into some very specific builds. Ultra Forest Kartenvoy, there hasn't really been any like pure Ultra Beast based decks do all that well. Obviously there's been like the Baby Blounds has done well, Big Blounds has done like reasonably well, but never have we needed to have the Kartenvoy as an option to get around some annoying Pokemon like Hoopers or Ninetales. Welder, obvious 5-star card. We know exactly how incredible this is. It has been the face of Baby Blounds, been the face of every Reshizard deck. It's even birthed like a whole bunch of different decks, like Blissey has been taking advantage of this. Whimsicott has been taking advantage of this. There's so many just like colorless attackers that can really just benefit off from Welder. And I think going forward, that's also going to be the case. Like, the card is just very, very strong. Even stronger, I think, post-rotation, because we have the Big Oven Stadium card, which makes it even easier than ever to get your Fire Energies into your hand all at once to start weldering. So Welder is a lot more live, more often throughout the entire game, post-rotation. So I think Welder will still be a cornerstone of every Fire deck, and I believe Fire will remain around the top tier, like, as long as Welder stays in format. The card is just too strong, and is still going to be the face of a lot of these red decks. Devo Spray Z gets a 1-star. It really hasn't seen much play outside of like Rhyperia milling style decks. There's not been anything else to speak of for this card, so very, very poor overall. Dusk Stone, I gave a 3-star initially, and I think we have to drop it lower, to be honest. The tool drop based decks never really took on Aegislash. Honchkrow ended up seeing play towards the latter stages of this season. We saw Origins, Grant Manley's Spiritomb Honchkrow deck do pretty well. And also we saw Hunter Butler playing Honchkrow in his Spiritomb Stunfisk deck to top 8 of the NAIC. But this was always a tech include. Honchkrow was in here just to wall out Weezings and wall out Zoroark, because they were all based on just special energies alone. And Honchkrow was never included because the Honchkrow only came out in very specific situations and like never anywhere else. The Mismagius tried to add in Honchkrow. Mismagius is like the little backup engine going in like Gardevoir and some other quad tag team based decks, but ultimately to not really any avail. So I think Dusk Stone ends up getting basically it has to go down to like a 1-star card, I think, actually. Possibly a 2-star card. But I think going forward, Honchkrow doesn't seem all that great to me, unless we are going to see more Porygon Z-based builds. There's a potential for a Whimsicott Porygon-based build. There's also, I think, recently I saw some hype around a new Naganadel deck that also played Porygon Z with a bunch of like recycle energies and stuff like that to be its engine. So if you're expecting Porygon Z to be good post-rotation, that might be the little time where Honchkrow becomes strong. But I think the likes of Tool Drop losing DCE is a big deal. And I think Mismagius could potentially be more played now that we have Reset Stamp to try and combo off its ability a little bit better to end up disrupting your opponent's hand a little bit more. But the lack of success I've seen from Mismagius so far makes me skeptical that that's going to be strong. So I think at the moment Dusk Stone's still probably a weak card. There is a new Chandelure coming out from the set, but that's also like on the territory of meme anyway, so nothing new really inspires me about Dusk Stone. It's still a really, really strong card in a vacuum. It's just we're still kind of in the waiting room for the best evolutions to actually take advantage of this card. So I think going forward, still not all that strong. Electromagnetic Radar, I put as a 4-star, but this is a straight up 5. This card carried the new builds of Pikarom. You can see what we were going for here, exactly with these 3 GXs on screen. That's what you'd be searching out. and it turns out that was enough to dethrone the Jirachi-based Pikarom and just become a pure double Let Loose, double Dedenne. I think it was like 3 or 4 radars in the deck, and it just became a staple. The best way to play the deck, and post-rotation, it's the only way you can play the deck. I think the Jirachi build, now that you don't have Guzma, is far, far worse than Dedenne. Instead, you just play those radars, those double Dedenne, and just have early search for Zoroark and Pikarom, and it's going to be absolutely nuts. Radar, especially when Ultra Ball's gone, uncontested, becomes a 4-of in Pikarom. Really, really strong card. So I think really the only reason we put this as a 4-star was like, we were kind of thinking like, yeah, with the Jirachi-based build, you probably only play like 1 because you can Volcanion it out, but turns out you just completely base the deck off of radars going forward, and even in the Unbroken Bonds meta, it's dethroned Jirachi for the most part, I would say. The Jirachi builds of Pikarom are still around for sure, and still did pretty well at NEIC and whatnot, but I think the Dene Let Loose build was the most popular. That's what we saw Emery Taylor take to a 2nd place, for example, and I think that's pretty much the gold standard going forward. Fire Crystal, easy 5-star card. Again, similar to the Welder, they go hand in hand. Fire Crystal has been the forefront of Salazzle hand-based decks. It's been the forefront of Blounds, Reshizard, like the Greens build, and the Jirachi-based build has played at least like 2 copies of each of those. And again, like the Blissey decks, the Whimsicott decks, all of these things all play Fire Crystal. It's a really, really strong card. The +1 value from energy retrieval is really, really a big deal. Pokegear 3.0, again, easy 5-star. It was the face of Green's builds as expected. You can basically see here that I was basically saying that Green's gear was going to face off against the likes of Jirachi, Zoro, and Salazzle. Like, it was either play Gear Green or play some of this stuff, but essentially it turned out that Gear was good enough to just go in a handful of decks anyway, even if they were playing abilities. Like, Weezing would play Oranguru and Let Loose, but still play like 4 Pokegears and whatnot. So Pokegears just found its way as like a 4-of in a lot of decks, just to be supplementary, like to protect you from Let Loose and just get you into more good stuff. You can see there I had like Guzma, Acerola, and Lusamine. I was basically saying potentially Gear would take a spot here or there for some of these cards, just so you could still have good searchability for them on the right turns, but not necessarily needing a high account of them. And we did see that a little bit. Handful of decks, again, looking at Weezing, it only played like 1 or 2 copies of Guzma and then had the Pokegears to try and dig them out on the right turn, but also be that flexible spot in the early game to give you better outs to Lily and whatnot. And I imagine Pokegear going forward will still be very strong. One thing that stays post-rotation is the majority of our draw supporters all remain in format. So Pokegear trying to dig out those Welders on key turns, digging out Greens, even just having better access to Elm or Lily on turn 1, still very, very strong. So Pokegear will continue to be a great performer. Surprise box, definite 1-star. There's some rumors of Gengar Mimikyu with like Omastar potentially coming back for post-rotation, but I'm still not a fan, and I think Surprise Box is still a relatively weak card, so it continues to be a 1. Zag Pickle, community rated at 2-star. It ended up being a 1-of, sometimes over Hiker in the Shedinja Control deck. Not on the slide, unfortunately. I didn't have the foresight of the Trumbeak Zag Pickle combo, where it's Chip Chip Ice Axe is what it got translated to for us. So yeah, I think the card's still pretty poor. We'll give it a 1-star. Beastbringer, 1-star. I basically talked about in the initial video that like there's anti-synergy with both Buzzwoles and Blacephalon GX. They're all cards that want to have early pressure attacks, and they prefer like the option of taking early prize cards, and the fact that you don't have great searchability for Beastbringer was the biggest issue. Greens can search out Beastbringer for big knockout turns, but it never even saw play in the Baby Blounds deck because it was more important to have a baton attached for the most part. So yeah, Beastbringer 1-star. Post-rotation, I think it's still probably pretty weak. I'm not actually giving much thought to this card in particular post-rotation because it has been so poor. But I still think it's awkward to sort of make space for the deck, make space for the card in your deck to actually get immense value from it. So I still think it's pretty sketchy to try and play this card. So yeah, it needs some very specific things to be correct. But I think it's still at a 1. Fairy Charm ability, trying to lock out some of these things. Fairy Charms in general didn't do all that well. Post-rotation, they are a huge threat. But in Unbroken Bonds meta, Fairy in general didn't do great. Like Gramble sometimes played one Lightning Fairy Charm. Rarely the ability one though. And same for Gardevoir Sylveon. If ever there was a charm that was being played, it was the Lightning one. I think not many others were played. So yeah, Fairy Charm didn't really lift up the Fairy decks enough to warrant play. That being said, with Field Blower gone and us basically being left with Lysander Labs, Faber, and like Caracosta, which is a stage 2 fossil, like there's a lot less tool disruption. Oh yeah, we have a Farfetch'd as well. We have some very subpar means of stopping tools in post-rotation, so that's something to keep an eye on. Especially with this Fairy Charm Lightning. This one saw a lot more play. I think it's more fair to keep in line with the community and keep it as a 3-star. It saw play alongside Gramble sometimes as a one-off, just because you can Dianther it back anyway. Same for Whimsicott, same for Guardy Sylveon. It was kind of played in those decks. And post-rotation, I think it's very good with Guardian and Whimsicott. Now, I think Guardy Sylveon losing Acerola and Max Potion is a big deal. But its type coverage is good. If there's going to be new Naga and Tina Chomp doing well, and if you have the Fairy Charm of Lightning and Ultra Beast, you potentially have a lot of good matchups. So I think looking at Whimsicott and Gardevoir for Worlds is pretty threatening when you incorporate charms like this to try and give yourself some like auto wins in theory if the opponent doesn't have enough answers to your Fairy Charms. Metal Core Barrier, 1-star for me. Yeah, it didn't see any play in any of these decks, and although Lucario Metal did end up doing really, really well, it was never the core barrier that was in the deck. It was always Frying Pan and nothing else. And as you can see here pictured, it competes very poorly with the Pan, and that's basically what I was saying. Post-rotation, there's no longer a check to Rotom. There's no more Alolan Muck, so this could be a card that can speed up the process for activating Rotomotor, which sounds like a meme, but we now gain Giant Bomb, which is effectively 8 tools that you can play in your deck that discard themselves as soon as you put them down. So like you put them down for a turn, then they discard themselves. So if your turn 1 is based on trying to dig for adventure bags, as many core barriers and giant bombs as possible, and then even try and use like the Dedenne to like discard the ones from your hand, you could speed up the Rotom archetype. And that's one that I've built for post-rotation and think it's very fun at the very least, because having like a spell tag and constantly hitting 120 with your Rotoms is actually pretty good when you can't be denied by like Reset Stamp or whatnot, because you never need to like continue to attach energy cards. You will already play a Jirachi Engine and 4 escape boards. So yeah, I think Rotom might be a contender for Worlds. Maybe a low tier contender, but still worth noting. Core Barrier might be used simply because it discards itself at end of turn. Secret Hood, I think this is one of the like most underrated cards from this set. Both the community and I rated it 1-star. I think it's much more fair to give it like a 2 or 3-star rating, because it could get around Vileplume. That's one of the abilities I didn't have pictured, and getting around Vileplume was a big enough deal for it to be a tech card in a number of people's decks. Pikarom decks, Reshizard decks, a handful of others wanted to add in Secret Hood so that you could get around Vileplume whilst also improving your time against Weezing. Both Vileplume and Weezing were sort of popular early on in the Unbroken Bonds meta, so the Stealthy Hood coming in all at once to deal with both of them in one card slot was relatively valuable. At the same time, you're a lot less punished by Low and Muck in random spots as well. For example, putting it on your Tapu Koko Prism Star so you can still use it and then get like a Marshadow Machamp working in one turn. That's again a card that we saw added into early Pikarom decks or Zapdos decks and whatnot. So definitely an interesting include. You can see I kind of did talk about the versatility of the card, but not really in full light of the Vileplume itself. The Vileplume was the biggest key thing here that I didn't have on the radar for the Secret Hood. And that versatility really did shine through when some stalling builds played Plume in the early stages of the season. So yeah, definitely got to bump that one up a little bit more. Power Plant was rated by 5-star for the community. I rated it 4. I think it's kind of debatably between 4 and 5. It was played heavily in Green's base build of Reshizard. Again, Kian's initial list played 3 copies, I believe, that won a regional. So for that alone, we have to put it pretty high up there. But if you're thinking about standard right now, like, I don't think there's any decks playing Power Plants. So, yeah, it feels like it's just a card that wasn't seeing a huge amount of play. Essentially, our tech spaces had to go towards field blowers rather than physical stadiums towards the end of this meta, just because of things like Shedinja Control popping up, and because of Wheezing with all of its spell tags in addition to Shrines, and a few other things here and there. So I think Power Plant hasn't seen its full potential just yet. I think going towards Worlds, the Power Plant looks a lot stronger as a disruptive element, because a lot more decks have to rely on Dedenne, I think, in my opinion. Also, things like Zeraora and Pikarom becomes even more influential. So I think the Power Plant will continue to be a strong card. But so far from what we've seen, it's kind of underperformed. So I think I'd lean towards it being more a 4-star right now, whatever. But I think it'll potentially get stronger for Worlds, depending on whether we need to tech other stadium cards. For example, if you have to tech Lysander Labs, if you're worried about the likes of Whimsicott, if you're worried about the likes of Shedinja Control, it may outclass the Power Plant in that regard for sort of protecting you against annoying decks out there. But the Power Plant still has some great disruptive aspects to it. Obviously, one of the biggest deals when this card first came out was like, haha, we have an answer to Zoroark. But Zoroark is now leaving the format, so there's potentially less reason to play Power Plant now than there was in the current standard. So that's an interesting interaction that we'll have to follow with this card throughout the post-rotation meta. Dust Island, easy 1-star, very poor card. Something to note, we no longer have Guzma or Rope, so potentially status conditions in general get stronger. I do not think this pulls the Alolan Muck deck into relevancy, though, so I think it will continue to be very poor. I shouldn't have just moved on from it so quickly. Status conditions are much stronger, but I still think it's pretty poor. Fighting Dojo, this card was plagued by the fact that we couldn't play this on PTCGO for the longest time, so people actually weren't able to test with it as much as they would have liked. There's been some interesting builds with this deck. Early on, there were some Sylvalai fighting decks that have been taking advantage of this card. That's for the most part the only time we've seen this card do well from the top of my head. There was the sort of Hitmonchan deck coming out that didn't do a huge amount, but could be an interesting one. Once again, Dojo is just this powerful card in a vacuum. We no longer have Brooklet Hill to compete for like fighting decks themselves. Brooklet Hill being like a really, really strong stadium for fighting decks just for consistency. Dojo being more of like a luxury card. But now there's not that competition anymore. So the fighting decks, if they want to have a counter stadium, they'll look towards Dojo first, I think. So that's something going for it. As you can see, I didn't rate it all that highly, and it didn't do all that well in post-rotation. Probably fair, pre-rotation. I think it's fair to put it as a 1-star, to be honest. But post-rotation, there's potentially more chance for this to see play. There's the Zygarde GX Baby Zygarde-based deck. There's still the option for hit-and-run style approaches with Hitmonchan. Hit-and-run gets much stronger post-rotation because there isn't Guzma and stuff like that, so you can actually try and power up some threats. There's even like the new Archeops coming out, which can be another hit-and-run style Pokemon. So some of that stuff to bear in mind, and the Dojo might be one of those parts of the puzzle. Triple Acceleration, easy 5-star. The community and we all recognized it. One card that I didn't have on my list here was actually the Naganadel GX for that GX attack, Stinger. To set yourself both to 3 prizes or whatever, that's pretty insane. Awesome to see that do so well at the NAIC, and that's just going to be something to bear in mind post-rotation as well, because we still have Naganadel GX, and there's even a new Naga which makes like Ultra Beast in general strong. So I think Stinger GX with Triple Acceleration is still a card, like a combo that we have to be aware of post-rotation. We've seen how strong it is with Dewgong, with Persian. Even Sylvalai was brought into relevancy. Nidoqueen did very well at NAIC, so most of the cards you're seeing on the slide, they did well purely based off of 3CE, like turning them into like excellent contenders. So yeah, Triple Boost continues to be insane, especially when DC is now gone. It makes 3CE in a vacuum much stronger and makes us want to play evolution cards, which is pretty awesome for the game. We move on to our first few Pokemon. Gloom and Vileplume obviously have done nothing. Kartana is like still that potential Ultra Beast include. Its free retreat was one of its biggest reasons why many people added it into their list. So you had some defense against Absol. When you're in potentially mirror match situations, you could still escape board this guy and move in and out of him when you needed to, or just have extra pivoting with Guzma and whatnot without the need of having a switch card to follow up from it. So yeah, Kartana was used in that regard. I think more often than not, Zapdos didn't play Kartana, but I know there was a handful of exceptions where he was added into the list. I think overall he continues to be a lot weaker than Buzzwole, as it's not a staple in Zap Beasts, but still performed reasonably well. In terms of its false swipe attack, we never even saw meme potential with this card. It was only ever used for its first attack in combination with Zapdos Beast for the most part, but that's just about it. I think post-rotation, having some additional free retreating Ultra Beast tags is very helpful for a Beast Box style archetype. The initial build I had of Beast Box was first of all trying for stack attackers alongside a split of the nags, but the more I look at it, the more I like having free retreaters instead of the stack attackers, because they're chunky, they make you add in switch cards into your list, and they're GXs that are weak to fire. All of those things are really bad, so I'm looking towards the likes of Kartana and Pheromosa, just because they have the Ultra Beast tag and they have free retreat, giving you effectively more optimal leads. So I think they may be put into Beast Box style decks simply for their free retreat alone, and because they have an Ultra Beast tag, so effectively you can draw 3 off them throughout the game. So that's a small shining beacon of hope for Kartana. Also bear in mind, of course, that it has weakness against Grass, which is good for the new Slowpoke side-up card that's coming out, but it's yet to be seen if that's actually a good card or not. So yeah, I guess it's a small thing to bear in mind. Buzzmosa, I rated it a 3-star. Community rating it a 4. I think the reasons why the community rated it so high was because of the big old Japanese tournament-winning quad Buzzmosa combo-based deck. That's why I think it's more fair to put this at a 3-star. I was living in fear of fire when I rated this card, and I think that's pretty much how we've seen it. Buzzmosa has shone mainly just for his Beast Game GX attack alone, combining him with Beast Energy alongside Zapdos to try and win mirror matches. But we also saw it combined with Quagnag, strangely enough, so that you use a unit energy and a bunch of waters to Beast Game for a huge amount of additional prizes as well. So pretty much paid exclusively for his GX attack. But yeah, still justifiably strong. Post-rotation, fire is still very good, so Buzzmosa will still continue to be used a lot, sparingly a lot of the time. Also, we don't have as easy gusting opportunities, so oftentimes Buzzmosa would just be you'd drop him, you'd Beast Energy, you'd Guzma up a Jirachi, or you'd Guzma up a Mew, or some other non-evolving Pokemon on the board. It's a lot harder to make that combo now. You have to do those things with custom catchers, so that's a lot less of a thing. So in theory, that makes Buzzmosa a little worse. So that's something to bear in mind. I think potentially this card is becoming less relevant in our format. That said, though, there's less healing, so if you're going to set up damage for things, if you put things just 50 or 80 hit points away from being knocked out, a Beast Game can be a sneaky win condition as well, so something to bear in mind. Venomoth GX continues to be very poor, 1-star. Arcanine, I rated it at 1-star, community were rating it at 2-star. I think it's actually fair to put this at a 3-star, to be honest. Mainly added into fire-based decks. The Jirachi Zards played a 1-1 line of Arcanine, mostly just to have a Vileplume answer. And yeah, Vileplume was enough of a threat for him to be a sometimes include into these decks, whilst also being reasonable for Zapdos, because you had 140 hit points and hit 120. Those are just 2 annoying things for Zapdos to deal with. So alongside, some one-offs like a baby Volcanion, it helped Reshizard have a reasonable Zapdos matchup. So I think the reason why I underestimated Arcanine was I was just saying, why would you play this when you can play other, good basic fire stuff instead? Like the Reshiram from Shining Legends, like the Turtonator that you can see on screen, like a baby Blacephalon. And it turns out we needed them to be an evolution to actually hit through Vileplume. So that's definitely reasonable. I rate this 1-star in terms of I never thought that Arcanine Turtles would actually end up being a deck. I think you could say it's a very low tier, Rogue at best, maybe a 2-star for Arcanine based off of that alone. But I will give it credit as a 3-star card just for its potential include in Reshizard. If you didn't want to play Stealthy Hoods, you could play the 1-1 Arcanine line instead, which a lot of people did do to reasonable success. So I think in that regard, Arcanine has earned his spot. Going forward, there's no more Vileplume, so I think Arcanine will probably do a lot worse and probably not make it into the fire decks, to be honest. I think he will fall off the map a little bit. For Blacephalon, I rated 5 stars. Community rated a little bit lower as 4 stars. I think overall we have to go with Community here. It did make a top 4 of the NEIC though, and it did end up being one of the decks that made the top 10 decks for earning points in the Sun and Moon to Unbroken Bonds meta. This was like the Marmite card of this set. I think people wrote it off immediately, said it was trash, or people would swear by it and say it was amazing. Obviously, we saw the green space build was the one that did a top 4 placement at the NAIC, which is a huge breakout performance when you think about it. There was also a handful of like top players playing Baby Blounds at the NAIC itself, taking a risk with this archetype, essentially for the sole reason that it can be a non-GX that can uptrade even on tag teams. That was the very simple selling point of this card, and that's why it was successful to a reasonable amount of tournaments, to be honest. It never became like a very, very popular deck in the room. It was never really like one of the top 5 contenders, you would say, but it had that small cult following and ended up having some reasonable results throughout as well. So that's really, really interesting. Going forward, Blounds does lose the, what's it called, Wishful Baton. Also losing Nest Ball is like surprisingly really bad for the deck because being reliant on just 4 Ultra Space is really ugly when you're playing so few basic Pokemon. So I think there are some challenges for Blacephalon going forward, but at the same time, Reset Stamp is also very bad for it. So there's plenty of reasons why Blacephalon won't carry through to a great late game these days, and that makes me skeptical for the archetype going forward. For good news though, like it still hits really hard, and it's a decent non-GX for that reason alone, so who knows, maybe Blacephalon can still find its way in a post-rotation meta, but personally, I'm skeptical because of the amount of reliance it used to have on Wishful Baton, and having to Welder literally every turn is a huge challenge for this deck that I don't think it can really overcome a huge amount. So yeah, still is Marmite for a lot of people, but I think it is pretty much well sat at like a 4-star card overall. Incineroar, 1 star, continues to be a run star, I think. The only hope this card has for post-rotation is you can Chandelier cheat it out if it's in the top 5 cards of your deck at the time, and you can discard it, and then Chandelier gets to put it into play instantly. The good news is you no longer like compete with Choice Band, so if there are decks that need to have additional damage buff, Incineroar is like one of the only ways you can do that now. So I guess that's cool, but it's still a slow stage 2 and probably won't see play. Reshizard, obvious 5-star. Well, you'll know that. It's, I think, one of the highest point earners from Unbroken Bonds, easily. And both the Greens build and the Kiawe Jirachi build did very well. You'll notice that I had Salazzle on the screen. It's one of the first ways I wanted to build Reshizard. That never really came to fruition. I think post-rotation, though, Salazzle gets way stronger. No longer are you just getting Guzma'd up by a Zapdos and 1 E-Power and knocked out. A lot of the time, your Salazzle will stay on board, get a huge amount of value, and draw you a lot of cards. Draws you towards Reset Stamps, draw you towards more Welders and more options as well. Draw you towards double Custom Catcher. These sorts of combos seem very reasonable. So I think Reshizard with Salazzle could end up being a thing. So far, I've played it with a green space build. It's not impressed me a huge amount. I think the 4 Volcanion get a lot worse post-rotation because there's not like a Zapdos that you can just go through turn by turn by turn. There aren't that many like just easy non-GX decks that you just run through because non-GXs are difficult to build now post-rotation. I think Malamar is probably the best non-GX deck out there right now just because Giratina recycles himself so easily, whereas a lot of the other non-GX decks will struggle because they don't have Rescue Stretcher, they don't have as easy Ball Search with Nest and Ultra Ball going. So the 4 Volk Greens build, as we know it, I believe will be changing. But I think the Salazzle build has a lot of potential, and in general, Reshizard has the capability to do still a good amount of damage. Obviously, losing out on Choice Band and Professor Kukui makes it potentially a lot worse against Pikarom. I think Koga's Trap may actually end up going into this archetype to help your Pikarom matchup. That's not a joke. I think the Salazzle build should probably incorporate 1 or 2 Koga's Traps so you can beat Pikarom, as embarrassing as that sounds. So yeah, let me know what you guys think about Reshizard post-rotation. If you guys have tested it out, let me know your thoughts. Salazzle, both myself and the community rated it a big 5 stars. I think we got to drop it down to 3 stars. It didn't end up being the way to build Reshizard. I thought it was. Post-rotation, though, I'm telling you, post-rotation, Salazzle's going to be insane. Salazzle, I think, is really good in Whimsicott Welder. I think it's also really good in Reshizard and possibly some other fire decks as well, if Blissey continues to be a thing, possibly as well. So Salazzle will probably end up living up to the expectation that everyone had of this card, but in Unbroken Bonds meta, it only really saw play in like Salazzle Hand, a little bit in Blissey, it's like a 2-of, I believe. And a handful of decks just in general trying to take advantage of that Fire Crystal loop with Roast Reveal. But I think post-rotation, this will definitely have much more of a shot because it's not getting Guzman and killed all the time. It can sit there for the majority of the game and gain value for you throughout the game, and that's absolutely just incredible. Volcanion. I was not a believer. The community were much more hot on this card. I even showed in the picture a Switch, a skateboard, and Jirachi, and I was saying that's the only way Volk will work. And turned out Jirachi was the best way to play Reshizard, and Volk was a one-of in those base builds, but I really underestimated the power of greens with Reshizard. We ended up seeing Reshizard do almost equally well with Jirachi as it did without Jirachi and just had the 4 Volks. I think my biggest issue with this card that I sort of missed was just the raw fact that it had 120 hit points. That hit points was just so annoying for Zapdos that remained a good enough deck the entire time that it made Volcanion still very, very strong. I think the biggest reason why I didn't trust this Volcanion was when I was making the set review, I much more believed that the 4 Baby Volt, I thought the Baby Blounds deck would already do the role of Volcanion, essentially. I thought Baby Blounds was going to be a big enough archetype to already be pushing Zapdos out the way, which didn't be the case. Which wasn't the case. In fact, it was the Greens Reshizards that were one of the ways that you could beat Zapdos. So Baby Blounds underperforming meant that this card was more valuable because Zapdos was still a factor in the format. You see what I mean? So because I misrated one card, it ended up making me misrate this card, which is a strange roundabout way of saying I was wrong on 2 different fronts. But yeah, High Heat Blow, perfect for Zapdos. And I think post-rotation, as I've mentioned, I don't really like the greens base build of Reshizard personally from what I've checked out so far. Fire Starter or Flare Starter is still really good when you are going second. You get a lot of energy acceleration. But I think both the Jirachi Zard and the Green Zard will be changing a lot. And I don't know if Volcanion will be surviving that change a lot of the time. So I have to rate him 4 stars, possibly even 5. Do I give him a 5? I think we have to bump him to 5 because Reshizard in both renditions would play it, and he's a 4-of in one of those 2 renditions of a top-tier archetype. So Volcanion, I'm sorry. I highly underrated you because I thought Baby Blounds would be the non-GX card that pushes out Zapdos. It turned out that Volcanion was the best answer to Zapdos we had, and that's why he saw so much play that he did. So yeah, Volcanion has to be changed to a 5 stars. I got it very, very wrong here. Onto the water stuff. Blastoise GX, I rated 1 star. Community rated 2 stars. I mean, I'm not going to be splitting hairs too much here. We know what the archetype's all about, but it's still a very clunky double stage 2 deck. Dewgong, I rated 4 stars, community rated 1 star, and it just won the NAIC, so Dewgong's pretty good, huh? Yeah, Dewgong's a real good card. It's great at grinching out basics, as you can see. Once again, I was big on Baby Blounds. It was a card that was in the picture, and that was one of the reasons why I like the Dewgong so much. As it turned out, it was actually Dewgong's ability to knock out Blacephalon GX that made it sort of come back in the format in sort of the later stages of the Unbroken Bonds meta, mostly piloted by Ivanov. Ivanov did very well in both Sweden and the NAIC itself, obviously taking down the event with his Dewgong-based build, and I think it was because of things like Ian Robb doing so well with Blacephalon GX at his own regional, which made people look back towards Dewgong, because with a simple choice band, Dual Blizzard, you can knock out a Blound and set up something else on the back. That meant that you could jump over beast rings, which was awesome. And in general, Dewgong sniping is just so cool. Especially when you have that Stinger GX option in the Zoroark-based decks. You can set up math with the Dewgong first, then you can Stinger, then you can like Dewgong finish the game all in one turn, or you can like, you know, if you set up numbers, your Zoroark or a Persian can finish off the game as well. So Dewgong, really awesome card. Its type coverage, it was great. Its spreading is still fantastic. Post rotation, there's no more Zoroark, and there's a lot less search for these stage 1s. So I believe Dewgong will be a lot less relevant. But that being said, Dual Blizzard is still a very, very, very strong attack, especially if you're the player going first. You can be very dangerous against a lot of people, so do not sleep on Dewgong post-rotation either, because that card is still really sick. I think we can even put it to a 5-star. It won the NIC, for goodness sake. It's awesome. Yeah. Chargebug and Vikavolt. I rated 2 stars. I think we have to bump this up to a 3-star. I mean, it had a couple of, like, lower finishes. Maybe 2 stars still fair for this, but regardless, the community was kind of on the same page here. The sort of abusive battery was really awesome to see. The Vikavolt mainly was just the new Vikavolt that came out. You never really paired it with these other guys, although they were options. But yeah, the 220 damage that you can do with Lightning Strike was strong, especially with Choice Band and whatnot. Yeah, this provided a reasonable rogue archetype, I want to say. I would only ever put it as reasonable. My own build that I tried to make was like Meganium Swampert base, which never really worked. It was in fact like a Jirachi based build with just like a thick Vikavolt line was the strongest in the end. Lurball was definitely an include that was really awesome to see. But yeah, I think Vikavolt ended up being reasonable rogue overall. Probably 2 stars. Between 2 and 3 stars, I guess, is the right place to put it. Post-rotation, we can't search out these cards, so probably just dies. Dedenne GX, easy 5-star. You can just basically just say, you can just see, you know, it's in the elk of these sorts of cards. It'll always see play. Rotation now kills Tapu Lele, so Dedenne is all we have. We have Cherish Ball as well, so if you haven't picked up your Dedennes yet, I would say get your hands on at least 2 Dedenne. I believe if you're a Cherish Ball based deck, so if you're any deck playing any GXs at all, you probably will be playing 4 Cherish Ball and 2 Dedennes in your new format deck. That's pretty much like the thing I'm starting with for almost everything. Dedenne is incredible and necessary in almost every deck post-rotation if you're playing an element of GX. So Dedenne is absolutely nuts. Stunfisk, I rated 1 star. This made top 8 at the NAIC. But let's be fair, that's the only tournament that Stunfisk got points. So I want to keep this as a 2-star. Community gave it a 3-star, so I mean, they take the point this time around. They saw more potential, but overall this was kind of a meme. I think the only upside of the Stunfisk is it can be a DC like Zapdos answer. Once again, it has 110 hit points. It can Zap Trap to knock out Zapdos turn by turn by turn, and it forces the Zapdos player to find Electro Powers and whatnot. So if you're a Spiritomb based deck, you also have like an Absol in your list. You can make life difficult for Zapdos and try and have like an even prize trade throughout the entire game. I am still skeptical to see whether the Stunfisk deck will be strong or weak against Spiritomb, and I'm still skeptical about the amount of reach this has against GX cards. I do like how Spiritomb sort of becomes the good threat in the late game for tag team matchups. That's the only real credit I can give to Stunfisk itself. To be honest, I think the success that Hunter had wasn't necessarily based on Stunfisk alone. I feel like he could have been playing like 1 or 2 copies of Stunfisk and like got away with it for the most part. So I still think Stunfisk in a vacuum is pretty weak, and I think going forward it will continue to be weak, especially because we lose DCE. So post-rotation, terrible. This format, we have to give it that small bit of credit and give it 2 stars. The Gengar kind of deck never really became a thing. Post-rotation, Ghastly being able to cheat out Haunters is good, but we still don't have great search for the rest of the deck. Like, yes, we have Treasure, but losing like Ultra Ball still really sucks, so I believe this will be poor. Hypno, obviously never saw play. Marshadow, 3 stars, I still think is fair. I mean, it was in almost every Zoroark deck, I guess, as a one-of. It also found its way into Pikarom, so potentially a 4-star is actually the most fair place to put this, alongside the community here. Seeing as though it did end up being in basically every Zoro deck, as well as some Pikaroms, like the majority of Pikaroms. So yeah, let's give it that 4-star. Really, really good card. I think post-rotation, it will continue to be strong. Field Blower goes, so there's less competition for this card. And there are still Prism Star Stadiums that you want to get rid of. Red Knuckles continues to be a threat. There are Psychic Naggers potentially being a thing in Beast Box. There will still be Baby Buzz, I imagine, to some element. And it's still relatively searchable if you're going to be playing treasures anyway. So Marshadow is still probably a reasonable card post-rotation. So yeah. Mew, rated by myself and the community 3 stars. The one thing I looked back at this line and I was like, man, I didn't even put Pikarom on here. What am I doing? Yeah, this was a Pikarom answer. Pikarom was still super good post-rotation. Oh, sorry, in Unbroken Bonds. And good thing I did have Dewgong on here. I was a believer of Dewgong the entire time. But yeah, Mew, still super good. Bench Barrier, still very relevant post-rotation. Pikarom will be a contender, if nothing else, so something to bear in mind. Ended up that its attack, placing 3 counters anywhere, is actually really good as well. Good for setting up numbers, so I think Mew's certainly a strong card post-rotation. It's, throughout the Unbroken Bonds meta, Pikarom continued to be very good, and I think at the NAIC there was a lot of Mew index, just so you don't lose to Tag Bolt turns, so yeah, Mew very strong. Mewtwo, I kind of overhyped. I sort of saw the VS Seeker potential and was sort of blinded by that power. It never ended up seeing a huge amount of play. And yeah, I believe post-rotation it will continue to not see a huge amount of play. So yeah, I overhyped the Mewtwo. I saw it as a VS Seeker and it certainly is not that. Mismagius, community was very hype on this card. I stuck to my guns and gave it a 1 star. I think 1 star's fair. It didn't succeed really at all. The Gardevoir-based decks didn't do very well. The Buzzmosa deck did not succeed, and this was not an engine for anyone. Mismagius was really terrible and did not work at all. So I'm happy that I stuck to my guns and got one right this time. I do try and be quite brutal on cards, and Mismagius, it really didn't do anything up to, Sun and Moon to Unbroken Bonds. It's done nothing, mainly because Guardian kind of underperformed compared to what people thought, myself included. But yeah, Mismagius, really poor card. Post-rotation, there's that second chance saloon of it being combined with Reset Stamp. And I personally think that's not going to be great, especially because you don't have Nespal for Misdreavus anymore. Committing a lot of deck spaces to having a thick Mismagius line just to try and reset stamp people, I think is relatively weak. I haven't tried it a huge amount though, so there's potential for Mismagius to be stronger post-rotation. But right now it is a super overhyped card when this set first came out. Muck and Lower Muck, easy 1 star, everyone knows. Wheezing, this was an underrated card, I think. Detention Gas being a much stronger ability than I think the community in general gave it credit for. You can see that everyone was along the right lines. We know exactly what Wheezing was all about as he first came out, but it turns out that Detention Gas alongside Shrine is putting a lot of counters on things throughout the game, and Splattering Sludge was a good enough attack to see it through a lot of the time. And when you just had Nestball and Treasures to get out your tech basics, it was a threatening non-GX archetype. So I think we've got to bump Wheezing up to a 4 star, I think. Not quite a top 10 contender, I don't think, overall with points earned in this format, but definitely above a Rogue. Definitely, you'd put it in the top 10 decks or top 15 decks in the format. I think definitely when you look back at the Sun and Moon to Unbroken Bonds meta, this was a powerful archetype that you had to bear in mind whenever you came up against stuff. And this was, alongside the Pikarom, Mew was added into decks, more Field Blowers was partly because of Wheezing. Honchkrow started coming up into decks as a counter to this and Zoroark all at once. So, I mean, Wheezing was one of these decks that a lot of people didn't want to lose to going into the NAIC, for example. So definitely a strong contender, one that I kind of under-evaluated based on how easy it actually was just to have a chain of Wheezings, just having high Ultra Ball, high Treasure, and just having high Rescue Stretcher count. Towards the end of this format, my Wheezing list played triple Stretcher just to make sure you kept having Detention Gas between turns, and that really did rack up. Grabominable, I don't know what I saw in this card. 1 star. Really, really bad. I was blinded by its type coverage, but yeah, this card was terrible. Diglett. This is used alongside the Giovanni's package for the Strategic Control deck, but I still will give it 1 star. I think Giovanni can stay at 2 star, but this card was a 1 star. Because you'll notice that I give the Rhydon a 2 star later on, and that's a big dreamer type thing. Myself and the community rated Hitmontop as 2 stars. I think it's a 1 star. We've seen the finished combo deck be pretty terrible overall, and I believe that won't be changing. Marshadow Machamp, I rated 3 stars, a little bit higher than the community, and I'm glad I caught this one because this Marshchamp ended up seeing a reasonable amount of play in some Viridian Forest-based Zapdos builds. You even see here that I had the idea with the lightning stuff to begin with. I also thought that it was potentially an include in Zoroark as it was moving away from Lycanroc, which was like a true statement, I guess, that potentially you would play Countergain Marshchamp to have some fighting coverage. That never really came into fruition, but definitely alongside the lightning stuff, this card saw play. It once again saw play in some like rogue Quagsire-based builds as well for type coverage, and that's definitely something of interest. I think Marshchamp is definitely strong post-rotation as well because we gain Black Belt, which is a very strong tool card, which means that, you know, with any colorless energy, you can attach that and have like a revenge-style attacker against the likes of Pikarom, and that's just relevant. So Marshchamp continues to be a strong revenge-style attacker, which has a silly amount of hit points, etc. Quagsire, 3 stars. I think that's still fair. Quagnag was, you know, one of these archetypes that you had to bear in mind. Alongside Onyx, or sometimes improvement on Onyx, meant that this card was like sometimes seen play. I would say more often than not, Quagsire would play Fighting Quag, usually in addition to Onyx rather than one or the other. But yeah, it was in here for its dumb brown typing alone, and that's where it, you know, was a breadwinner for winning those sorts of matchups against Zoro and Pikarom. Post-rotation, I believe Quagnag is dying. I think there's not enough Bull Search to support the archetype, so for that reason I think this archetype will flop. Rhydon, both myself and the community gave it 2 stars, so at least I wasn't alone in trying to think that this was a good enough milling archetype. The 5 cards are just a scary thought process, right? You just think, man, losing 5 cards potentially between like every turn is so scary. But yeah, it just wasn't consistent enough to be able to use a Giovanni's Exile every turn. Stack Attacker, I gave 1 star. Community gave 2 stars, and I think I will give credit to the community on this one. This saw play in the latest renditions of Stall, I want to say. Sander and a few other European players who did well with it at Sweden played Stack Attacker alongside Counter Energy, so that you could be a tanky basic that could use top down for some type like coverage as well. So I'll give credit where credit's due. Stack Attacker ended up being in Stall in the late renditions at the very least. So yeah. Ninja Zoro, I rated very poorly. Community rated it a little bit higher. I wasn't a believer, and I think apart from one sub 100 player special event, this didn't do well at all in the Sun and Moon to Unbroken Bonds format, so that's pretty much true to the colors. I think post-rotation, this has a good amount of support. There's the new Stadium card coming out for free retreats to overtake the Altar of the Moon. There's also the Weavile GX coming out, so I think even like the Sableye Tyranitar and the Dark Grey Umbreon, I think that sort of deck will sort of blend into one and become a thing. So I believe there's hope for Zoro Ninja post-rotation, but in Standard it really didn't do much apart from one like highlight moment towards the early part of this new format. This Greninja, easy 1 star. It's a clunky stage 2 that never really saw play alongside the other Greninjas. Honchkrow was rated 4 star by myself and the community, which is really interesting because this was like a super hyped card when it first came out, and then like no one ever really built a deck around it. I think one of the first things I wanted to try was a pure Honchkrow disruption deck from the offset, trying to use, you know, like Let Loose plus Unfair GX to just be a turn like 2 or 1 win condition if you could Dust Stone him out really, really rapidly, and then just use that Ruler of the Night to sort of see you through the game. That never really became a thing, and the amount of lightning that remained in the format meant that Honchkrow was sort of stamped out from ever being its own deck, but it did sort of have a nice cameo role towards those latter stages where, once again, at Origins and at the NAIC, there was a handful of players running Honchkrows in their list just to use Ruler of the Night to sit in the active and say, you can't attack me if you're a Zoroark deck or a Weezing deck, and that just claimed straight up wins. And that's a very, very strong thing to have, just auto-winning as soon as you get a Stage 1 into play. And that's why Honchkrow is probably valued at a 3-star, I think, overall. Overrated in terms of it never became a deck the entire time in this format, but it ended up being like a 1-1 or a 2-2 line in enough decks to just auto-win a couple of otherwise dodgy matchups. So that's a pretty interesting way to show off this Honchkrow. It was under the radar for the majority of the season, and then, well, the format, and then it sort of popped up in an event here or there just to flip some matchups in your favor. So that's definitely a cool thing. Going forward, DCE rotates, so I think its ability gets a lot weaker. That's not to say there won't be any pure special energy based decks, but I believe this archetype will still be kept under the thumb by Pikarom for the most part. Also, losing DC for yourself makes Featherstorm a much, much slower attack, so that's also something to bear in mind. Pretty bad news for Honchkrow, I would say, overall. Sharpedo, obviously, was a lot weaker than Deganadel. I believe post-rotation that will continue to be the case because we have better search for Naga than Sharpedo, so I still believe this will be very poor. Spiritomb, I rated 1 star, and the community, similar to the Stunfisk, they rated the Stunfisk and the Spiritomb at 2 stars. I rated both at 1 stars, but Spiritomb was much, much more impressive than I ever gave it credit for. It saw play in a decent number of Zapdos Beast decks just because you could get it down early and build Spite and then Rainbow it late game and have like a swing potential. But once again, Hunter Butler top 8ing with this deck at the NAIC really shows how powerful in a vacuum this card is. Also, Grant Manley taking down that Origins event with Spiritomb is awesome to see, alongside Umbreon and Honchkrow. So those decks really pushed this up into relevancy. If you're looking at the sort of latter stages of Unbroken Bonds, this is genuinely an archetype that you have to be aware of, and you probably don't want to just lose to it. The Spiritomb deck in general has a very bad Zapdos, and it does take some bad auto losses, so it's not like the deck's like amazing or anything, but Spiritomb has become a key component of, you know, the top decks in Unbroken Bonds. So for that reason, I probably have to give him a 3 stars. So yeah, Spiritomb, I underestimated you. You're much, much stronger than I expected. Post-rotation, I'm not a huge fan of the Spiritomb. Obviously, there's less worry about spread. With Tapu Koko going, with Weezing being a lot less powerful post-rotation, there's a lot less drawback to building Spite on your board the entire time. But Ball Search for basics gets a lot worse. Sure, you can still play Elm if you want to, but I think, especially with Eevee rotating, you no longer have that early game pressure from Umbreon. So I think the Spiritomb deck has to readjust and find a way to be relevant in some other form. Alone in Dog Trio, easy 1 star. Genesect, easy 1 star. It was potentially used in some Melmetal decks just as a pivot, but that was about it. Lucario Melmetal, this is a card that I seriously undervalued. I gave it a 2 star. I was living in fear of fire, saying this card is nuts in a vacuum, but fire will always come to destroy it. The community was a lot more hyped on it in general and gave it that 4 star. And I got to hand it to you, community. You stuck to your guns and were correct here. I underestimated the power of this card simply by saying, yeah, sure, this is bad against fire, but just don't play it against fire. Put down your Heatproof Bronzong, put down your Vileplume, just have your army of Hoopers and Regigigas when you're up against those red decks, and try and find a win condition in that matchup via just not ever using him at all. So I think that's really where I went wrong with this card. You can see on the screen, it's ticking all the boxes. I think in a vacuum, it was a really, really strong card, and I think it continues to be very strong post-rotation, even with Ace Roller and Max Potion going, by the way. I think this card will continue to be very strong. I think Stall will be very, very much like broken apart post-rotation, but overall, I think I really, really undersold this card. Really, really strong. Just that essentially have 320 hit points, right? When you GX and have Frying Pan, and you're just doing 50 pokes a turn. That pressure is just so good. Being able to take 6 prize of this deck, being a much faster win condition than most stall decks, whilst also pressurizing attackers that they're building up. Like, you can Guzma things and hit them and pressurize a heavy impact for turn 2 as well, which is just so unreal. Yeah, this card really, really busted. Melmetal, 1-star, obvious. It was never seen play, really. You had to play other annoying walls instead of this guy. Gardevoir Sylveon, both myself and the community overrated this card. I think we underestimated how bad the Zard matchup was, and that alone was a reason why this deck never really saw a huge amount of play. As I just mentioned with the Lucario and Melmetal, they found a better win condition than Gardevoir Sylveon against those decks just by having Stone Wall cards that the Fire decks couldn't get around, whereas Gardevoir Sylveon never really had a backup strategy alongside to try and win out those bad matchups. So although Guardian was and is very good against the likes of Zapdos, the likes of Zoroark, and takes in a few other auto wins like throughout, I think just the amount of fire really put people off Gardevoir Sylveon, and the fact that a lot of time you were greens based, you would lose to Let Loose as well. So I think too many things went against Guardian overall, so we'll have to drop it down to a 2-star, I think. Post-rotation, those tools get a lot stronger. The Ultra Beast Charm, the Lightning Charm are really, really powerful threats. But losing Max Potion and Acerola is a big problem, so you might be left with only Super Scoop Up, which is very, very scary. So Guardi has, in a vacuum, a lot of very positive matchups, depending on the amount of tool answers people have to fairy stuff. But you are very, very concerned about the lack of healing that you have in your deck. Tag Switch as well is a really good include for this deck, because it makes the Fairy Song like so much better. So it gains a lot, it loses a lot. I don't know if it will outweigh and be a lot stronger. Obviously, you're a lot less worried about the Reshizard decks now that they no longer have Choice Band to one-shot you. So potentially you can try and trade on them a lot easier. Who knows? I'd like to hear your thoughts on Gardevoir Sylveon going forward. I haven't tried to build it just yet. I've been more focused on Whimsicott as my fairy deck. But this is one that I want to try and start building towards because it may still be alive. Speaking of Whimsicott, I gave it 1-star. Community was a little bit more hyped on this. I think for Unbroken Bonds meta, Whimsicott didn't perform like much at all, really, in any big events that I can think of. So I think it's fair to give this like a 1 or 2-star. Maybe 2-star just for experimentation. It was experimented with way more than expected at the beginning of the Unbroken Bonds format. I remember Team Level 5 came out with a Whimsicott Porygon Z archetype and tried to like make it popular, and a lot of people started testing on ladder and whatnot. Whimsicott was one of those decks that people could get their hands on quite early on PTCGO, so you just saw it a lot of times. But it ended up flopping in most renditions. I think the Magina Tapu Lele like rendition never really worked. You didn't have enough oomph, you didn't have enough damage once you were knocked out. The Welder Whimsicott was weak to all sorts of things like Let Loose and Guzma, and the Porygon Z list was also weak to Let Loose and Guzma and whatnot. So I think Whimsicott ended up being too inconsistent in this format. But post-rotation, I have hope. I think Toy Box gets way stronger when you don't get hit with Let Loose anymore. Even if you are hit with a reset stamp, it means they don't have them for later, and you're still drawing 6, which is a lot more than 4. I think Whimsicott's tools are way better. The Lightning Charm and the Ultra Beast Charm, they are way, way stronger. And because your opponent doesn't have Guzma or Rope anymore, they physically have to flip more coins throughout the game. And the more coins you make them flip, the more chances they have to waste their turn. And the more turns they waste, the better the matchup is for you, right? So I think Whimsicott has a big chance post-rotation. Keep an eye out for it. It's definitely one I've been testing. Celesteela was a 1-star. I think the potential there was great, but overall it wasn't good enough to become a 60th card in anyone's list. And that's where we'll continue to see him, I imagine. Persian GX, rated a 3-star. I think it's fair to bump this up to a 4. It ended up being in every Zoroark list as at least a 1-1 line. So that's awesome. It never really ended up being like a full-on Persian deck outside of possibly some credit to the little rogue deck that Rahul Reddy made, the Silvally Persian deck. Also, Persian made its way into Blacephalon GX. Zach Lesage playing that at first. So Persian branched out into a few different builds, but was pretty much a staple in Zoroark throughout the entire time it was released. So for that alone, Persian bumped up to a 4-star. Really, really incredible card. Post-rotation, it can search things, and when you don't have ball search anymore, that's amazing. So Cherish Balling into a Persian and then giving yourself that teammates effect still seems really, really good. So keep an eye out for Persian post-rotation. I still think he's awesome. Porygon Z rated at 2 stars. We never really saw the big wacky combo Porygon Z with a bunch of tag teams do that well. But we did see it kind of combo off with Whimsicott a little bit. I think that never really like took off too much, but Crazy Code never really ended up being a big enough thing. Too much like aggressive let loosing going on in the format for stage 2s to really compete. There is good news though. Post rotation, we gain recycle energy, which means once you find those 4 recycle energies, it can be like an infinite amount of free retreats, basically, because you recycle energy them back to your hand, and then you can reattach them with Crazy Code all at once, so you can move between your guys really easily. Also, if something gets knocked out, you immediately get back those recycle energies to like reattach to your board, so your attackers get a lot like more consistent throughout the entire game. Obviously, there's less gusting effects for your stage 2, so it stays around for longer, and there's no let loose either. So I think there's hope for Porygon Z. It's obviously hard to search him out in the initial stages because you don't have Ultra Ball for Porygon and whatnot. So I think stage 2s are in a really weird spot post-rotation. They're going to stick around when you get them into play more often, but getting them into play in the first place is more difficult. So it's kind of a double-edged sword for Porygon, but I know a lot of people are hyped about the Recycle Energy Porygon Z combos, so we might have to give credit to Porygon in future. And that's it, guys. That's the review. I think some of the biggest ones I kind of messed up on was that Volcanion and maybe a couple others here and there. But overall, I think not too bad. I think one of the other blunders was Lucario Male Metal. I really wish I had rated that higher. But overall, not too bad. I've got to bear some of these things in mind when I start my next set review, which, as mentioned, is going to be later on, I believe Monday of next week, if not Sunday night. Depends how quickly I can get everything prepared. But yeah, definitely do get involved in the set review going on right now, the community review. It is in the description below. Hope you did enjoy, guys, and I hope you're ready for the next OmniPoke set review. It'll be coming to you not too long now. So yeah, hope you enjoyed, and I'll see you in another video tomorrow. Cheers.